Okay, enough of that. Let's get on with the build. This is about the 1/537 scale Katinga, the Klingon battlecruiser from Star Trek the Motion Picture. When I opened this video, I showed you some pictures that I have from the studio model and the opening video clip sequence from when the Klingons first encounter V'ger, and you have the complete flyover of the Katinga studio model. My build obviously is going to be based upon the AMT kit from 1984, which I believe is a reissue from the 1980 issue, the original issue of this kit. When it is fully assembled, it's over 15 inches long. The kit comes with several sprues. All the plastic is actually in really good shape, and there's very little flash on it. Unfortunately, the model is not completely accurate to the studio model. As you can see from the instructions, there's not a lot of parts, and it is relatively easy to go together. It does have some gap issues. Also, you can see the original instructions that show the placement of the decals, which there are very few of them on the model. I don't know if these are going to work. They are really old. Most of these, fortunately, I think can be repainted, and that's probably what I'll do. When I originally started the kit, I started working on the bulb section at the front and drilling out all the windows, which is a really hard thing to do on that circular surface. And I found inaccuracies with the kit, which I don't know if those inaccuracies are on the studio model or not, but it was interesting because it was the first time I'd really looked at the kit in obviously well more than 20 years. I then went in and started drilling out the holes for the windows on the ship, and I watched Star Trek the Motion Picture, the opening Klingon battle sequence, quite a few times to identify all the light locations. Some of them are identified on the nacelles, for example, with little nubs, but there's one on the front of the nacelles that's not there, and then there's a couple locations on the bottom of the engineering hull that have white running lights besides a red flasher light. And on the side of the manifolds, there's one white light on each side for those. And then I went ahead and drilled out the impulse engine ports, cut them out and filed them all down. That was a process where I used a utility knife and some microfiles to sand all those down and get those cleaned up and everything. And I used a grinding wheel to smooth out the photon torpedo launcher on the rear back as well, and then I went in and cut out the hole openings that needed to be on the rear bulkhead of the engineering hull piece. Well, after I did that, the next step was to actually work on the nacelles and to start installing all the fiber optic cable. After watching the motion picture, the Klingon battle sequence several times, I really thought that I needed to try to get the lights and scale correctly in relation to the AMT kit as on the studio model, so it would look cool. I tried 0.5 millimeter, 0.75 millimeter, and 1 millimeter fiber optics, and it appeared to me that the 1 millimeter actually, in size, the lights would look correct to the scale of this model kit in relation to the studio model. So that's what I decided to use. I knew, however, by using the 1 millimeter that I was going to have some problems because the nacelles are so small, and it's going to be very difficult to get all those cables routed. So I went ahead and installed them and used epoxy to lock them in place, and started running them through all the nacelles. This was a multi-step process, using epoxy, using foil metal tape to hold them in place, also using very low temperature hot glue to hold them steady and in place, and it became a multi-step process in relation to using clamps to start clamping the nacelles together to get everything locked up nice and tight, which actually has taken about three different steps and a ton of clamps for each one to get them all clamped up. So after getting through all that, the next thing was to fire up the fiber optics and see how they looked. So I created an emitter with a 3mm white LED. I thought I was going to need a 5, but After trying the 3mm, it worked out perfectly, so I used a 3mm and shrink wrapped it with a piece of yellow shrink wrap, which I'll cover up with a piece of black. And I cut all the fibers down to equal length and polished off the ends of the fibers, put them in and heat shrunk it down, and this is the result. I'm very pleased with how bright they are. They seem to be in scale nicely. And after going through all the process with all the glues and clamps, it's nice to see that none of them are broken and they're actually working perfectly fine. Which thank God. I really have been nervous about bending one to the point of kinking it so the light would not disperse properly or transmit properly, or literally breaking one. So this is, I believe, the port side, and it's turned out quite nice. Okay. The clamps are off the other side, the starboard side I believe, and it's together pretty good. I've got some sanding I'm going to have to do along the seams with the amount of glue that I had to use, a little filling, but overall it's together quite nicely, and nothing that can't be fixed with some sanding and some red putty and a new coat of primer over it and get it all cleaned up, and she'll be ready to be mounted onto the main hull. So the next step is I'm going to have to create the new light emitter for these fibers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of these out to the shortest one, and I'm going to cut them off all nice and flush, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them and I'm going to grind them, the end of them, with this grinding wheel on my Dremel stylus and a polishing wheel, and polish them all off so they're nice and polished, so they'll transmit light really well. And then I've already wired up an emitter. This is another 3mm white LED, resistors on there for 9 volt, and I'm going to put the fibers in here. See how bright that is, and shrink wrap it down, and that should be just about ready. The port side nacelle, the one I was showing earlier, I went ahead and moved to close up the little bit of an opening I had on the bottom, which was small, but I found that it's really important when you go to even close up a small section that didn't glue really well, it's best to clamp the whole piece. So I did that with a little section down here on the bottom, and this little section right here was still not closed good enough for me, so I went ahead and went in and did a little filing on there to clean it up and put some more glue on there. So those two sections are setting up, and I've still got the LED going on that one. Want to burn that LED in as long as possible, because I basically don't want to get to the point of putting it all in the model and turn the LEDs on and have one go out. Usually with an LED, if they're going to go out, they're going to go out within the first couple days of use, so I like to leave them on for a few hours to make sure that they are really good. So let me go ahead and prepare up the other emitter and get the fiber in there, and I'll show you what that looks like. Well, they're in there. This is the other nacelle now, and I've got all the fibers lit up. Let me turn out a little of this light, and you can see them. There again, I cut them all to length, and using a grinding wheel, after cutting them, ground them all down so that they were even, and then I went back and I used a polishing tool on the my Dremel to polish them, which I think is really important. I know I've seen some people just cut them and put them in. Especially when I'm using a smaller size bulb, or not a super bright bulb, I find it you get much better light transmission if you polish the fibers. When you do that, they obviously get nice and bright on the ends. This hasn't been heat shrunk yet. Right now they're just in there by tension because I actually have enough fibers to really fill that tube up quite nicely, but I'll heat shrink that, which it'll shrink just a tiny bit, not much, but it'll lock them in place, and then this side will be done. Nice and bright, and just the way I like it. But given the size of the fibers, I think they'll be perfectly fine on the model. Obviously, there will be a little less light when they get cut back, and I may dust them slightly. But I am very happy with the way they've turned out overall. I think they'll look really good. And these are all regular white or cool white, which I decided all the running lights would be the cool white, and all the window lights on the model will be the warm white temperature LEDs, which I think will be a nice contrast, and will just look a little bit better. I did go ahead and order from JT Graphics some accurization parts for the model kit. The manifolds I decided to go ahead and get, and the disruptors. Obviously this kit doesn't come with disruptors. There's disruptors on the hull parts. If it was assembled, there should be disruptors here and here for rear disruptors, and on the underside of the main engineering hull there should be disruptors at this point and this point on the underside for forward and side shooting. These disruptors are placed just inboard of the two holes I have drilled here for the white running lights, which are on the model. This one's for a red running light, which I'll be installing later as well. All of these will be fiber optic. So the bridge dome, which is totally inaccurate on this kit, I will be replacing. The onion bulb at the front I will be replacing as well, and maybe one or two of the other parts. I have another one of these kits, the 1986 release from, I think it's 1986, from Star Trek 6. It's identical to this kit. The only difference is the instruction sheet has been updated, and but the plastic is the same. So I may be doing that kit. I'm thinking seriously about doing that one, the Konus version, the Star Trek 6 version, that has all the photo etch detailing all over it, and a different altered paint scheme, and a different bridge. So I may be doing that one as well. I've always wanted to have both of them. I may wait to see if round 2 does anything with the repop of this kit that's scheduled to come out in 2013. I've heard that there's really not much changes to it, but I'm going to wait and see. It's still a great kit anyway. But that's it for this update. Hopefully in the next update I'll be getting the lighting and the engineering hull, the main hull here. I've already got them nicely light blocked and everything, and we'll be doing that. I've got to figure out what I want to do for my blinking lights, whether I want to create a circuit for the blink, or perhaps use a blinking LED for that. But anyway, thank you all for watching, and happy modeling.